Here's a common game mechanic. A character in a combat-centric game has a meter that fills when they either deal or receive damage. The more they fight, the more it will fill. When the meter hits full capacity, the character will be able to unleash a powerful attack, something that will give the player a huge advantage for the scenario they find themselves in. It's a clever system, one that crops up all over the place. In order for this versatile mechanic to travel from game to game, its theming will need to change. This meter will need a name. In Hades, it's called the God Gauge. After the player character has made a pact with one of the Greek gods, he will be able to call on that Olympian's special ability. Perhaps the meter represents his worthiness or the god's willingness to aid in his quest. In Final Fantasy VII, this is called Limit. When a character has been fighting for a while, they will reach their limit, so to speak. The meter represents each character's energy, their determination, their anger. God of War just goes ahead and calls this meter Rage. It's appropriate that a game about an angry dude killing stuff has a dedicated meter for his anger. As the gauge fills, his rage rises. And when it can't rise anymore, the player can send him into a blind fury. They'll have a major advantage when he's in this rage-induced state, until the meter runs out and it needs to be filled again. God of War takes this common system and themes it around the character's emotional state. But that's not really how anger works, is it? Anger, just like any other emotion, can be caused by a number of things and manifest in a multitude of ways. Emotions are complicated. They're weird, amorphous things that don't always make logical sense. But a game mechanic, a bar that fills in the corner of the screen so you can punch people better, has to make logical sense. It has to be predictable and controllable so the player can incorporate it into their strategy. While God of War is about an angry dude, and in fairness, he does have quite a bit to be angry about, his anger is clearly defined. His singular emotion manifests as a meter in the corner of the screen. His emotion has become a game mechanic. When someone sees a snake, they get scared. It's a common, perfectly understandable reaction that many of us would have. Throughout history, several theories have been brought forth to explain why seeing a snake causes fear. From the evolutionary theories brought forth by Charles Darwin to modern advances in neuroscience, how emotions work is a question that has captivated researchers for ages. But no matter the explanation, they all have one thing in common. The emotion is caused by something. Each of the prevailing theories starts with a hissing snake and ends with the sensation of fear. An outside stimulus leads to a change in one's emotional state. If this, then that. None of these theories take magic into account, though. The same year the furious Spartan flew into endless barrages of violent rage, a very different game released for the Nintendo DS, Super Princess Peach. The game presents a subversion of the Super Mario formula. This time around, the heroic plumber and his brother gets kidnapped by Bowser, and it's up to the princess to save him. The damsel in distress gets her own adventure. What little story Super Princess Peach has involves the theft of the Vibe Scepter, a mysterious wand that controls the moods of everyone in the land. Peach, however, is immune to the Vibe Scepter's powers, making her the only one who can save the day. But instead of fireballs or tanuki suits or vacuum cleaners, Princess Peach has her own unique weapon at her disposal: finite control over her emotions. Peach has the all-familiar meter that increases little by little after defeating an enemy or collecting a gem. The game calls it the Vibe meter. The localizers just really like the word vibe, I guess. When the player wants to, they can activate one of Peach's 4 emotions: joy, gloom, rage, or calm, all represented with cute little hearts on the DS's touchscreen. Tapping one will change Peach's emotional state and deplete the Vibe meter. Tapping it again will turn her back to a neutral state, saving the rest of the vibes for later. The entire game is designed around the limited use of these emotional states. Joy will make Peach feel like she's floating on air with glee. She can fly up to hard-to-reach places, turn a windmill, or blow away smoke with the spin of her skirt. Gloom will send her into a crying fit, her tears able to water plants and put out fires. While crying, she can run faster than usual, trading control for speed. Rage manifests as a giant flame consuming her. She can burn things, melt things, and, my favorite, use the fire to lift a hot air balloon. This is objectively wonderful. And calm makes Peach enter a meditative state, allowing her to regain some health. Super Princess Peach presents many creative puzzles and boss battles based around switching between these emotions. Like, okay, you remember the Petey Piranha boss battle from Super Mario Sunshine? The one where you have to, like, shoot water in his mouth and make him bloated and then you jump on him? Well, they do that here. Only Peach has to cry into his mouth to fill him up with water. This game is filled with stuff like that, problems that have to be overcome by understanding and utilizing Peach's emotional state. But that being said, is this game really about emotions at all? It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to replace Peach's joy, gloom, and rage powers with wind, water, and fire powers. Replace the Vibe Scepter with some generic elemental gems, and nothing in the game would change really at all. And while on a narrative level, Peach is supposed to be the only one able to control her emotions, it certainly doesn't appear that way. Peach violently oscillates between joy and rage with the mere tap of the touchscreen. Nothing really causes her to feel a certain way other than the player's input. There's a then, but no if. When it comes to the problem of converting something as nebulous as emotions to something as rigid as game mechanics, Super Princess Peach decides to make things strictly mechanical. Even if that means unintentionally giving the protagonist a stereotype of a mood disorder. Even if that means the first Super Mario game to star a woman features crying on command as a central ability. Emotions need to make sense on a gameplay level. They need to be firm and predictable, because ultimately Super Princess Peach is a platformer, and platformers need to have predictable, understandable parameters to work. Super Princess Peach isn't so much a game about emotions, rather it's a game about the abstractions of emotions, the connotations associated with certain emotional states. It's a game that's not concerned with engaging with Peach as a character that thinks and feels things. It's a game where you can melt ice blocks by thinking about your ex. And really that's all it needs to be. Another wrinkle in Super Princess Peach's design is that each obstacle needs to be overcome in one single specific way. As in, the only way to remove these clouds is to activate her joy and spin around in the air. She can't burn the clouds into vapor or weigh them down with her tears. This obstacle is only susceptible to one ability. This means that the level design dictates the emotional states Peach will find herself in. There's not much room for player expression. There's not much room for strategy. Look at all of us. These are all of our memories together. They're a little sad now, but we should be happy that they happened at all. These are the words that greet the player after the prologue of Omori, a game with a lot to say. Its narrative focuses on a group of friends in the aftermath of a traumatic event. Each of the main characters have their own ways to cope with the tragedy, but the game zeroes in on Sunny, a boy who has shut himself away in his house for years. Most of the game takes place in Sunny's mind, his headspace. There, his counterpart Omori, along with his buddies Kel, Aubrey, and Hiro, go on adventures through the dreamlike world. It's no secret that Omori is an emotional game. Its whole premise revolves around the main cast's emotional responses, but its gameplay is all about wielding emotions strategically. Omori is a turn-based role-playing game. Select commands and then the characters will perform them. Build your stats, use the special attacks wisely. It's pretty by-the-numbers RPG fare. Except for the main hook of Omori's combat design, the emotion system. Okay, you know the common RPG thing where certain enemies will be weak to certain attacks? Like a fire guy will be weak to an ice spell, or an electric-type Pokemon will be strong against a water type, that sort of thing? Omori forgoes this very common RPG mechanic entirely. Every foe and every ally is standard. Outside of stat differences, no one has an innate advantage against anyone else. Instead, a battle participant can be afflicted with an emotional state. There's neutral, which is the default, nothing too crazy there, but that can shift to one of three states: happy, angry, and sad. Happiness increases the character's luck and speed, but reduces their hit rate, the implication being that they're feeling energized and carefree. Anger raises attack, but lowers defense. They're in a fury, but their guard is down. And sadness raises defense, but will redirect incoming damage to the character's juice meter, this game's equivalent to magic or stamina. But it lowers their speed. They've got emotional walls up. These three states form a rock, paper, scissors of sorts. Happy beats angry beats sad beats happy. Anyone in battle can find themselves in these states, so deciding which state to use ends up becoming a question of strategy. Only certain party members can inflict certain emotions. If the player wants to make someone sad, that will be Omori's job. Making someone happy will be Aubrey's, and making someone angry will be Kel's. Hiro is the healer, so I guess that would make him calm, I guess? So if a battle starts and one of the foes is sad, would it be worth it to spend Kel's turn to make one of the party members angry? Would it be worth it to lower their defenses for this advantage? But what if one of the foes is sad and the other is happy? The player could spend Omori's turn to make the happy foe sad and Kel's turn to make an ally angry, or they could just stay neutral and hope for the best. But opponents can also inflict emotional states on the party. If the foes put a player at an emotional disadvantage, they can either just roll with that disadvantage, or they can spend a turn to change their state again. But then the opponents could just change their own states to give themselves an advantage on the following turn. It's a simple yet engaging system that offers a surprising amount of depth. There are other aspects to the system too, like how emotions can be stacked on top of each other, so someone could be double sad or triple happy. There's also the fear emotion, which is more like a status ailment. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. Like Super Princess Peach, the emotions in Omori are rigid and mechanical. It's easy to see where their corners and edges are. One could give this system a different coat of paint and nothing would really change, at least on a mechanical level. But unlike Super Princess Peach, Omori makes sure to give some reason as to why a character's emotional state changes. There's an if and a then. When Kel makes someone angry, he does so by annoying those around him, classic little brother activity. It's a simple facade, squint and you can see through it, but it's still there. Someone's angry because Kel won't shut up. Aubrey can make someone happy by cheering them on, and Omori can make someone sad by reading them a depressing poem. In all instances, a character's emotional state is altered by some outside force. A character doesn't get angry for no reason, Kel does something to make them angry. And once they're in that emotional state, they have an accompanying physiological response that's reflected in their character stats. On a gameplay level, making someone angry is a matter of strategy. While the recipient of that anger is experiencing an involuntary response, the character, and by extension the player, is making a deliberate choice. Emotions can aid in survival, but Omori kind of subverts that idea. The manipulation of emotions can aid in survival, tricking oneself or others into feeling a certain way in order to give some sort of advantage. In a way, it's kind of sinister. Despite this, Omori's narrative is ultimately about emotional honesty. It's about the various coping mechanisms the real-world versions of Sunny, Aubrey, Kel, and Hiro use to keep going despite everything that's happened. There's a scene midway through where the real-world Kel and Sunny meet the real-world Aubrey, and she's furious. Not in some weird, abstract RPG way, not because Kel annoyed her, but because she's actually in pain. She's angry, and she has every right to be. She wasn't manipulated into feeling this way, or maybe she was, but not by the player, not by another character's battle action, but by everything that's happened, by the tragedy that sits at the center of Omori's story. She's angry because their memories together are a little sad now. Super Princess Peach and Omori theme central game mechanics around emotional states. They are both strict and mechanical, opting for clear tools for puzzle solving and battle planning, as opposed to a more accurate emotional simulation. This was the right call in both cases, by the way. And in both games, one emotion is inherently better to deal with certain obstacles than another. Water will always make a plant grow. A happy friend will always be stronger against an angry enemy. While Omori gives the player more options than Super Princess Peach, that underlying truth will always be there. But does everyone need to abide by those same rules? Shin Megami Tensei Persona, or Revelations Persona if you're nasty, follows a group of high school students who are granted the ability to summon the reflections of their true selves, their personas. Around the same time this happens, strange things start happening around town, least of which being the town being overrun by demons. The ragtag group of teens fight their way through the hordes of monsters to uncover what exactly is going on. At first glance, Persona 1 is a traditional RPG through and through. A party of characters traverse dungeons, get into turn-based battles, and gain stats. Except the demons the characters fight are more than just mindless grunts. They have emotions. When entering a battle, the player has the option of contacting a demon. The player selects which character will do the talking, and they will have a conversation that can have a variety of outcomes. While this is a main feature of the larger Shin Megami Tensei franchise, a long-running series that I'll admit I've barely scratched the surface of, I find the way Persona 1 handles it fascinating. When entering a negotiation, a diamond will appear at the top of the screen. Each edge will represent one of 4 emotions: angry, happy, scared, and eager. Each party member will have 4 negotiation abilities that reflect their character. Nanjo, the affluent know-it-all, will be able to bribe, pontificate, condescend, and be sarcastic. Brown, the flirty attention seeker, can try using a pickup line, telling a joke, chatting, or startling. Mark, the loudmouth troublemaker, can dance, taunt, stare, and brag. Each party member is like this. The player is tasked with selecting the right character and performing the correct action to manipulate the demon into feeling a certain way. Happiness, fear, and anger are fairly self-explanatory. If a demon ends up feeling a certain way after the negotiation, it will affect the following battle. A happy demon will get a corresponding status ailment and/or give a gift. A scared demon will be paralyzed with fear, give a gift, or run away. An angry demon will get stronger and maybe paralyze the party member doing the negotiation. This is the worst outcome, by the way. But the best outcome is to make the demon feel eager. I don't know about you, but eager is kind of hard to define. How exactly does one make someone feel eager? Eager to do what? Making a demon feel eager will bestow the player with a spell card, which is important for making new personas down the line. Without getting too far in the weeds, you want as many of these as possible. So, which of these actions will make a demon feel eager? Well, it depends. Each demon will have a different reaction to the different negotiation tactics. They're dictated by their personality traits and their gender. For example, the pixie is a joyful, timid female. The zombie cop is a forceful, snappish male. That sort of thing. If the player enters a battle with a pixie and wants its spell card, they will have to look at its traits, look at the party's available actions, decide which party member is fit for the job, and then talk their way through. The pixie appears in the first area. At this point in the story, the player will have their unnamed main character, Nanjo, Mark, and a girl named Yuki in their party. They will have 16 possible negotiation actions to take. The player will have to guess which of these actions will make a joyful and timid female demon eager. On a first playthrough, this involves a lot of trial and error. Maybe the main character's singing will work? No, that makes her happy. What if he persuaded her? No, that makes her angry. In actuality, the main character can't make the pixie eager at all. With this party lineup, the pixie responds best to Mark's bragging and Nanjo's condescension. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed it either. So the player will have a 50-50 chance of selecting the right character, and then have a 1/4 chance of picking the right action after that. Generally, once a player finds a negotiation tactic that works, they can hit it multiple times until they get the outcome they desire. But there's a catch. Say the player picks Nanjo and has him condescend to make the pixie eager. Well, condescend also has the ability to make joyful, timid females scared. So hammering on the condescend button would make the pixie give you what you want, or it could just make her nervous. Negotiations can also have little flukes. The outcome might be random every couple of times. Occasionally, a demon will ask a question. Depending on how the player answers and the demon's personality, it will affect the emotions in a seemingly unpredictable way. That's the thing with Persona, the emotions are unpredictable. If the player doesn't have a guide open while playing, they'll stumble around in the dark, get on the nerves of many demons, get reactions they weren't anticipating. But for the most part, it's just a matter of figuring out who should say what. But since there are so many factors at play, factors that aren't always clear or logical, it feels random. I got this Jack Frost spell card by having a character lie to him. Like, why did that make him eager? We know the ifs, but we don't know the thens. In the games we've seen thus far, switching emotions has had specific goals in mind. If we want to make a character happy, we could just tap the touchscreen or select it from a battle menu. The ifs have been kind of arbitrary. But in Persona, that's flipped on its head. We know what we want to happen, we just don't know what we need to do to get to that point. The ifs are tangible actions a character can take, but the thens are somewhat unpredictable. The same action to a different demon will have different results. The action remains the same, but the reaction is different every time. When it comes to the clash of emotions being nebulous and game mechanics being rigid, Persona's demons feel rather nebulous. But it's just an illusion. Persona withholds key information from the player. It doesn't tell them how to make an enemy feel eager, but there is a literal way for each demon to become eager, or happy, or scared, or angry. Unlike in Omori, in which cheering will always make everyone happy, in Persona, singing or dancing might have adverse consequences. But also unlike Omori, this mechanic is reserved only for negotiations. When it comes to the moment-to-moment combat, everything is clean and literal, as it should be for a turn-based RPG. Persona understands that while an element of randomness and uncertainty can have its place, it wouldn't be a good idea to build an entire battle system around it. Thus, the amorphous, unpredictable realm of demon emotions is sequestered to this little corner of the battle system. In a playthrough of Persona, the player will negotiate with dozens upon dozens of demons. It's impossible to get to know everyone. The player will have to reduce a demon, in this case a living thing with its own wants and desires and preferences, down to only a few traits. After playing for a while, will patterns emerge? Maybe, probably. But what if there were even more characters that had to be affected? What if there were hundreds, thousands even? Would that even be possible? Roller Coaster Tycoon is a game about chasing perfection. The game is a sandbox simulation title in which the player can build the theme park of their dreams, as long as they have the resources to do so. The player will have to balance their own ambitions against their bank accounts, the available space in the park, and good old-fashioned physics. It provides tools for players to realize their vision, while at the same time providing boundaries to work within, kind of like playing with Lego. The game presents a series of different scenarios for the player to get through. Within a certain time frame, the player will either have to attain a number of guests with a certain park rating, or have the park reach a certain monetary value. So while Roller Coaster Tycoon provides tools for creative freedom, it simultaneously judges the park based on a set number of parameters. After a certain point, the player isn't creating for themselves, but for their park guests. The guests and the park itself are in constant conversation with each other, but that conversation is strictly a mathematical one. Each ride in Roller Coaster Tycoon is graded on 3 criteria. The first is excitement, which is how appealing the ride is, how much fun it seems to be. This is determined by the ride itself, but also how the ride is placed within the park. If it's close to other exciting rides, it will have a higher excitement rating. The second is intensity, which refers to the physical effects of the ride. A merry-go-round has a pretty low intensity. It doesn't go too fast and just moves in a circle. But a steel roller coaster with loops and stuff has high intensity. Every ride falls somewhere on the intensity scale. It should be noted that while a more intense ride will be more exciting, a ride that's too intense will scare guests away, lowering its excitement rating. And the third is nausea. If a ride involves a lot of spinning or loops or quick changes of direction, it will have a higher nausea rating. So each ride is given these 3 stats, 3 literal numerical values. At the exact same time, Roller Coaster Tycoon generates hundreds upon hundreds of guests for each park. These guests have 2 data points. Each guest will have a desired ride intensity. They're presented to the player as a range, more than 2, between 4 and 10, that sort of thing. Each guest will also have a certain nausea threshold, low, medium, or high tolerance. Each guest will have these 2 data points, which, when multiplied by a couple hundred, creates a diverse crowd. So you can see how these different data points interact. The ride has to be somewhat intense to be exciting, but not too intense because it will lead to a higher nausea rating. But if it's not intense enough, it won't attract guests. But some guests aren't interested in an intense ride, but they still want to be excited by the park's attractions. It's a web of wants and limits, a collection of rides in conversation with a crowd of people. A crowd of people you want to make happy. Even if the park seems to be doing well, even if that balance is struck, there will still be some other factors at play. I built a park that I thought was doing pretty well, only to have guests complain that they couldn't find the exit. Like, what? Turns out that in the struggle to have all the rides I wanted fit in the park, I ended up making the footpaths confusing. Even if there's a cool log flume, if you get lost, you're not going to have a good time. When I thought my park on the lake was doing well, my overall park rating plummeted out of nowhere. It turns out I didn't put enough trash cans and hire enough maintenance staff to clean the walkways. And yeah, even if this park has 2 really cool loop coasters jousting each other, if there's vomit on the sidewalk, I don't want to be there either. Maintaining the park rating and the overall happiness of the guests feels like chasing a mirage. Do one thing to improve the park and something else will crop up. Build a roller coaster and it's too intense. Build some bumper cars and it's not intense enough. Why can't everyone just be happy? Roller Coaster Tycoon, while it is precise and mathematical, it's almost too literal to keep up with. It's impossible to keep track of the preferences of 1,000+ guests. It's impossible to build a roller coaster that everyone will want to ride. When it comes to the clash of being amorphous or rigid, Roller Coaster Tycoon, on paper at least, puts all its chips on being rigid. Everything in the game is assigned a numerical value that talks to some other numerical value. There's no randomness whatsoever. But since the game has so many variables, it kind of loops back around to being amorphous. There are so many guests, hundreds if not thousands of them with their own preferences. A park will have dozens of rides, not to mention price points for admission and food will have to be spot on. The park itself must be easy to navigate. There's so much to keep track of that it ends up becoming a game of trial and error. There isn't much perceived randomness like there is in Persona, but it can kind of feel random. While each individual will have their own reasons for liking or not liking something, when those individuals become a crowd, those little quirks are impossible to predict. The most you can do as a park manager is create the best park you can, to try your best to make everyone happy. If you've ever made something before, written a story or painted a picture or performed a song or given a presentation, you're probably familiar with this conundrum. Once something is out in the world, there's no telling how it will be received. It's just out on its own. You're not there to explain it or defend it. And while the goal might be to make the audience think or feel a certain way, there's no guarantee that it will get its intended reaction. The parks in Roller Coaster Tycoon are large, mostly static collections of rides and shops and scenery. Once a guest enters the park, there's nothing the player can do to help them have the best time. You wish there was something more exciting than the hedge maze? Bro, have you seen the rest of this park? I'm playing the original Roller Coaster Tycoon, or at least the version that's on Steam. This game has remained unchanged for over a quarter of a century, and this static piece of software can still elicit emotions within its audience. When I sit down to play Roller Coaster Tycoon, I feel happy when my park starts to grow. I feel intimidated by the limitless possibilities. I feel frustrated when there isn't enough room or money to do what I want. I feel a sense of accomplishment when I complete an objective. The game didn't tell me to feel this way, at least not explicitly. In the same way a roller coaster can be designed to be thrilling, Roller Coaster Tycoon was designed to make its players feel a certain way. Are we any different from the thousands of guests in our parks? When I play Persona, I feel curious about its many mysteries. I feel annoyed when I accidentally anger a demon. I feel joy when I succeed. When I play Omori, I laugh at the absurdest humor. I tear up at its devastating moments. I practically went through the stages of grief when a big twist was revealed. And when I play Super Princess Peach, I feel calmed by its charming visuals. I feel clever when I solve a puzzle, and I feel happy when I rescue a kidnapped toad. These games manipulated my emotions. Their design had functionally the same effect as tapping a vibe heart on the touchscreen, having Omori read a sad poem, having Mark dance for a leprechaun, or building a shiny new ride for an amusement park. They made design decisions, many different ifs, in order for the faceless crowd of players to have their own thens. But those thens aren't guaranteed. Someone might play Super Princess Peach and feel bored, or play Omori and feel nothing, or play Persona and get annoyed. When someone sees a snake, they get scared. There's a stimulus and a reaction. But not everyone is afraid of snakes. Some people love snakes, study them, know all about them, maybe keep them as pets. Seeing a snake might make some people frightened, but to others, seeing a snake might elicit a different reaction, a more positive response. There's still a beginning and an ending, but those endings can change from person to person. There's no way to predict how everyone will react, which is why emotions are such a fascinating aspect of life. As much as we want to categorize everything, there will always be exceptions. I suppose that's why the clash of emotions and game mechanics is so fascinating. It's attempting to do the impossible, to simulate the unpredictable nature of each individual's reaction, to take something as personal as feeling melancholy or furious and turning it into a tool to overcome a digital obstacle, to explain something like a feeling with numbers, to take someone's emotional well-being and turn it into a bar at the bottom of the screen. But wait, didn't I leave out kind of a big one? Well, a companion video can be found over on the I Am a Dot Patreon that covers another game all about emotions, The Sims. Joining will get you access to many exclusive videos like that one, along with early ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes goodies. Thanks for your support.